The greatest 3 weeks in all of sports are here. March Madness has arrived. Johnny Sports Network here to provide you with my bracket. And I am going to have two bracket videos this year. One, this first one right here. This is based off of my initial reaction to the bracket. No research conducted, just going off of vibes. And the second one, which will be either Tuesday or Wednesday. It'll be after intensive research and tons of analysis and data. But this one just based off of vibes and intuition. Starting things off with the South region, Auburn and the winner of the playing game between Alabama State and St. Francis, PA. There are no more guarantees in March Madness, as we have seen with UMBC and FDU pulling off 60-1 upsets. But no upset here. I think Auburn, they move on. Louisville and Creighton, the 8-9 in the South region. And this, in my opinion, could end up being the best 8-9 matchup of the 4-8-9 matchups. And I think it's very fitting because this is the game that is going to begin the action on Thursday. Louisville is a team that I feel like was not done justice. I feel like they should have been at least on the 7 line, maybe the 6 line. While Creighton, they've been a team that has been hindered by injuries throughout almost the entire season. And with this game being essentially a home game for Louisville, given this game is in Lexington, I'm going to go with Louisville to move on. Michigan and UC San Diego. UC San Diego was in their first NCAA tournament appearance, while Michigan, they have won the Big Ten tournament. And I do think this is going to be a very popular upset pick. And 9 times out of 10, when there are a lot of people that pick an upset, it typically does not happen. 9 times out of 10, it's not going to work out. Kind of like with McNeese State last year over Gonzaga. It didn't happen. But I understand why people would pick UC San Diego, but the fact that I think this will be a consensus 12-5 upset, I'm going to go with Michigan to move on. Texas A&M and Yale. Texas A&M, they have had an up and down kind of season. 1 week it looks like they can be a sleeper team for the Final Four, and then the next week they look like a first round exit. And the last team you want to see on your schedule for the tournament is Yale, a disciplined team that we saw upset Auburn last season, the first round. And I think Yale, they do it again. I think Yale pulls off the upset once again. The first round is, I think this is going to be a very low scoring game. And a game like this, I think will go down. It favors the underdog. Ole Miss and the winner of San Diego State and North Carolina, I do not think it matters. But either way, this is a very interesting match, no matter which way you shape it. Chris Beard, an experienced coach, San Diego State with Brian Dutcher, a lot of experience. San Diego State, they've made runs in the last several seasons with Brian Dutcher. In North Carolina, we saw a team in North Carolina a few years ago make a run to championship night. But there was a lot of controversy about North Carolina being in this tournament. And I'm going to go with the winner of this playing game to pull off the upset. As most years, we have at least one play-in team that pulls off a first round upset. And the reason why that is is even though it's an extra game, you already have the experience of the tournament. You know what the tournament's going to be. You don't have the anticipation, you don't have the jitters like other teams will. And that's why I think whoever wins that playing game pulls off the upset. Iowa State and Lipscomb. Iowa State, they're dealing with injuries, some uncertainty, but I think Iowa State will be fine for this matchup. I think they advance. Marquette and New Mexico. Shaka Smart, not great in the tournament since the Final Four at VCU, and New Mexico back in the tournament. And they were a popular pick to be a Cinderella team last year, but then we saw them get absolutely dismantled against Clemson. I think Marquette wins this game. I think it's a game that goes down to the wire and Marquette just finds a way. Michigan State and Bryant. Michigan State, they've been upset as a 2 seed in the past, but not this time. They move on. On to the West region. Florida and Norfolk State. I'm going to go with Florida. UConn and Oklahoma. Another great 8-9 matchup. Two coaches with serious tournament experience, especially UConn, the two-time defending national champs. Porter Moser, he has gone on tournament runs in the past with Loyola Chicago. Porter Moser's in his first tournament with Oklahoma. I think UConn moves on. Memphis and Colorado State. There is typically at least one 12 seed that upsets a 5. And one thing I did look at, I know I said I didn't look at anything before the video, but one thing I did see is that Colorado State is currently favored against Memphis by about 2.5 points. I'm going to pick Colorado State to pull off the quote unquote upset. Maryland and Grand Canyon. I would not be surprised if there was an upset here, but I just can't see it. Although, if Maryland were to lose this game, it's going to be because of their lack of depth. In fact, I think Maryland's lack of depth is going to be their downfall in this tournament. But I think they get past this game against Grand Canyon, but I would not be surprised if Grand Canyon pull off the upset. They are an experienced team, but if they were against any of the other 4 seeds, I would 100% pick them to win. Missouri and Drake, another matchup that I'm really conflicted on. Missouri, an improved team from last season, one of the most improved teams this season, and Drake once again in the tournament, despite the roster being had to be completely rebuilt. Drake, they have been a team that a lot of people have picked in years past, but they have unable to get the job done. And I think it happens again. I am gonna go with Missouri, but I don't know. I could change my mind later on and pick Drake. I don't know, but I'm not exactly sold on Drake to win a tournament game until they can show me that they can, which they have been able to do no matter what the circumstances have been. Texas Tech and UNC Wilmington. I'm going to go with Texas Tech. Kansas and Arkansas. What a matchup for the first round. If you were to say that Kansas and Arkansas would face off in the tournament this season, you would think it's a Sweet 16 or Elite 8 game, perhaps. But it's a first round game. This is the worst Kansas team we've seen in a while, at least under Bill Self. While Arkansas, they were completely out of the picture, but then Arkansas, they started to go on a run. And they are going to get Boogie Fland back for this tournament that is anticipated. But I just think that in a battle of two of the best coaches in this tournament, I am going to go with Kansas. St. John's and Omaha, and I kind of wanted to make the emotional pick and pull off the upset because Omaha is the alma mater of plenty of people I know. but I'm going to go with St. John's. But I will say, I am 100% rooting for Omaha to pull off the shocking upset. On to the East region, Duke and the winner of American and Mount St. Mary's. There are concerns about Cooper Flag's status for the tournament. It's anticipated he'll be ready to go, but it's still a possibility he may not be able to play early on in the tournament. If I had to guess, I think he's going to play in this game, but he will have limited minutes. But I think that Duke will be just fine without him for this game. I think Duke moves on. Mississippi State and Baylor. I am going to go with Baylor. Oregon and Liberty. I'm going to go with Oregon. I have read somewhere recently that Dana Altman has never lost in the first round of the tournament. Oregon is always a team that is going to be ready for the early stages of a tournament. And I think Dana Altman is one of, if not the most underrated coach in all of college basketball. Arizona and Akron, I really want to pick this upset. I really do. But Akron, they are a team that is able to find a way. But I am going to go with Arizona. I do think at least one of these 13 seeds is going to pull off a first round upset. And as you can see, I have already picked Yale to pull off an upset. So I will go with Arizona. But if that upset happened, I would not be surprised. Because we have seen in the past Arizona crumble in the tournament. We've seen it time and time again. BYU and VCU. At first, I had BYU winning this. But then I thought, this feels exactly like BYU and Duquesne last year, where everyone talked about BYU's offense, everyone talked about Duquesne being a bid stealer, and how Duquesne was just lucky to be there. And then Duquesne pull off the upset. And I think it happens again. I think BYU, they get upset once again by the Atlantic 10. And I think BYU moves on. Excuse me, VCU moves on. BYU pulling off the ups against BYU is what I have for this. Simply because I just feel like it's a repeat of BYU Duquesne last year. Wisconsin and Montana. I'm going to go with Wisconsin. I do think Wisconsin, they still have some momentum from the Big Ten tournament. Even though they lost in heartbreaking fashion, I still think momentum is there. St. Mary's and Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, another team that showed lots of improvement from last season. St. Mary's, a team that I never want to pick to go far in the tournament. Because St. Mary's, they always, always feel like a first round exit. And I'm going to go with the upset. I think Vanderbilt moves on. Alabama and Robert Morris. Some concerns with the status of Grant Nelson, but I think Alabama will be fine in this matchup, and I think they move on. On to the Midwest region to close out the first round. Houston and SIUE. I think Houston moves on. Gonzaga and Georgia. Gonzaga, they have made the Sweet 16 9 years in a row. And they get a Georgia team in the first round that was on the outside looking in for most of the year. But then, as of late, pulling off some massive upsets to put them in this tournament, I think Gonzaga moves on. Clemson and and McNeese State, once again a 12 seed. And I think McNeese, once again, is going to be a popular upset pick for the first round. McNeese State, I think, is a team that everyone is going to want to root for. And they are improved from last season. But as I said earlier, whenever it feels like there is a lot of people on board for an upset, it typically doesn't work out. And I think it happens again. I think Clemson, they move on. But I think McNeese State this time around is going to have a better performance in the first round this year than last season. Purdue and High Point, and believe it or not, I am going to call for the upset. This game has upset written all over it. For some reason, this feels like Virginia and Furman a couple of years ago. As Purdue is a team that we either see them make deep runs in the tournament or they get eliminated round one. That seems to be the theme, just like Virginia. The theme for Virginia is always they make a deep run or they lose and get upset in the first round. And that's what Purdue's fate has been in the tournament as many times as I can remember. I think High Point pulls off this upset. Illinois in the winner of the playing game between Texas and Xavier. And I'm going to go with Illinois. Unless I see something in the Texas Xavier game that sticks out, then I'll pick the upset. But for now, I have Illinois. And by the way, if I do change my mind on any picks, I will put it in the comment section. Kentucky and Troy. Kentucky, they have been hindered by injuries like many other teams going in this tournament. And I really am tempted to pick the upset and take Troy because Mark Pope has yet to win an NCAA tournament game. But I am going to go with Kentucky. Although if Troy won, it honestly shouldn't surprise anybody, but I'm not going to call it. But I do think Kentucky, it's a game they just find a way, which is all you can really do in March. UCLA and Utah State, I'm going to go with UCLA. I don't know how many Mountain West teams I can truly trust in the tournament. Tennessee and Wofford, I'm going to go with Tennessee to move on. On to the round of 32, Auburn and Louisville. I think that Louisville is going to make this game closer than what is going to be anticipated. I do think Auburn wins, but Louisville in this game, and I've been impressed with Louisville all season long. If I had to give out my opinion, Louisville is the most improved team from last season. But I think in the last few minutes of the game, I just think Auburn is going to be too much for Louisville in that one. Michigan and Yale. I kind of want to pick an upset here because at least one double digit seed makes a Sweet 16. But I'm going to go with Michigan. Even though, in my opinion, Dusty May's run of the Final Four at FAU a couple years ago was pretty fortuitous, I think Michigan advances to the Sweet 16. The winner of the playing game between San Diego State, North Carolina, and Iowa State. Again, I don't think it matters who wins that matchup. I think they upset Ole Miss, then upset Iowa State. And I would lean it towards being North Carolina because typically when there is a team that the masses say they don't belong, they shouldn't have been in, they get proven wrong and they start to win a game or two. Next thing you know, they go on a run. The biggest example that sticks out to me, 2016 Syracuse. There was all this talk about Syracuse should not have gotten in. Syracuse didn't belong in this field. But then they made it all the way to the Final Four. It just shows that you just have to be in this tournament and you have a chance. And I think one of those two teams will be in the Sweet 16. Marquette and Michigan State. I'm going to go with Tom Izzo. I think Shaka Smart's struggles in the tournament continues. Florida and UConn. The one seeds, they're going to have their hands full in the second round, no matter who they face off against, assuming, of course, all one seeds advance to the second round, which that's not a guarantee, as we've seen a couple times in the last handful of years. But I'm going to go with Florida. Colorado State and Maryland. I am pretty conflicted on this one, but I'm going to go with the upset. As much as I don't want to put my trust in Mountain West teams, Colorado State, they have had the hot hand as of late. I think they've won 10 or 11 games in a row, I think. Plus, I think Maryland's lack of depth, I think, is going to haunt them. And I think it ideally would be here. Missouri and Texas Tech. I'm going to go with Texas Tech to move on. Kansas and St. John's. Even though I did say this is the worst Kansas team under Bill Self, I still think they find a way to make the Sweet 16. Usually, a two seed loses in the first weekend. Very rare do all four two seeds make it to the Sweet 16. And in my opinion, St. John's is the weakest two seed. Duke and Baylor. I am going to go with Duke. I think that even without Cooper Flag, Duke would be fine at least to make it the Sweet 16. Oregon and Arizona. I think Arizona's nightmares in the tournament continue, and the underrated Dana Altman advances to the Sweet 16. VCU and Wisconsin. I think this game will be very reminiscent of Duquesne and Illinois last season, where Illinois ended Duquesne's run. I think Wisconsin does the same to VCU. Vanderbilt and Alabama, kind of like with Duke and their injury concerns, even without Grant Nelson, I think they would be fine for the first weekend. Alabama moves on. Houston and Gonzaga. I might be the only one that you see do this. Houston, they are not getting talked about as much in comparison to the other one seats. A lot of the talk has been about Auburn and Duke. Those two being the class of the tournament is going to be reminiscent of 2021 when it was Gonzaga and Baylor in the championship game. Houston, they have been notorious for being out earlier than anticipated. But once they're a team that plays good defensive. Once they get matched up against a team that is capable of scoring points, they lose. And I think Gonzaga, plus Mark Few also being experienced, I think they get the job done and pull off the upset as we see our first one seed fall in this tournament. Clemson and High Point. I am not tempted to pick High Point, but I'd not be surprised if they did make it because realistically, all four of these teams, I think, could be at this point. It's just a guessing game, but I'm going to go with Clemson. Illinois and Kentucky. I am going to go with Illinois. I guess Mark Popey gets his first tournament win against Troy, but then loses to Illinois. And Kentucky's injuries, they've been haunted by in this throughout this season. This late stage of the season will be exposed and Illinois moves on. UCLA and Tennessee, this could be a tough matchup for Tennessee. I wouldn't be surprised if UCLA pull off the upset, but I'm going to go with Tennessee. On to the Sweet 16, Auburn and Michigan. I am going to go with Auburn. I think in this game, Auburn is going to, in the game before against Louisville, I think Auburn will be humbled a little bit. They're going to realize that they're not necessarily invincible and they don't play down to Michigan. I think they advance to the Elite Eight. San Diego State or North Carolina against Michigan State. I am going to go with Michigan State to move on to the Elite Eight. Florida and Colorado State, I think the Cinderella run ends here. I think Florida moves on to the Elite Eight. Texas Tech and Kansas. Texas Tech, they've been in my Final Four for about the last month. I get Final Four vibes from Texas Tech. I think they move on to the Elite Eight. Duke and Oregon, and I'm going to start having to reference this bracket is based off of Cooper Flag playing in the tournament, being tournament ready. But if Cooper Flag does not play in the tournament, if he's unable to go, then I think underrated Dana Altman pulls off the upset. But this is based off Cooper Flag being available. I think Duke moves on. Wisconsin and Alabama. I am going to go with Alabama to make it to the Elite Eight. I did want to pick Wisconsin. I was really tempted, but I just think Alabama has better depth than Wisconsin does. Gonzaga and Clemson. Gonzaga, if this takes place, they'd be in their 10th straight Sweet 16. But I do think the run ends there. Clemson, I think, is really an underrated team. And Clemson, I think they once again make the Elite Eight once again this season. Illinois and Tennessee, another big test for Tennessee if this is the matchup. But I think Tennessee, they do get it done and advance to the Elite Eight. On to the Elite Eight now. Auburn and Michigan State. I think Auburn gets upset here. I think that Tom Izzo, he finds his way into the Final Four. Duke and Alabama. I am going to go with Duke. And once again, this is Cooper Flag being tournament ready. Florida and Texas Tech, as I have mentioned, I have had Texas Tech in my Final Four throughout the last month and a half. I've been really impressed with Texas Tech all season long. But the way Florida is playing basketball right now, I feel like I just can't pass them up. Clemson and Tennessee, two teams that made the Elite Eight last season, but with heartbreaking defeats. One team in this bracket advances to the Final Four, the other, another heartbreaking loss in the Elite Eight. And advancing to the Final Four, I have Tennessee, which I think Clemson, they also are a sleeper team to make the Final Four, and I would not be surprised if we saw Clemson go on a run and make the Final Four. On to the Final Four, and this is a very interesting Final Four. Both Final Four matchups. The youth versus the wise. Tom Izzo being the wise. Tom Izzo being Mr. March. And Todd Golden for Florida. Todd Golden, I think 10 years from now, has the potential of being one of the best coaches, not the best coach in college basketball, if he keeps things up. And Duke taking over for Coach K and Rick Barnes, a coach with a lot of experience, but yet to make the Final Four. In the first matchup, Michigan State and Florida, I am going with Florida to advance to the championship. Duke and Tennessee, assuming everything is put into place for Duke, I think they advance to championship night. And in my championship, Florida and Duke. And if this is indeed the championship matchup, then I think this has the potential of being a championship game for the ages. And in this bracket, winning the 2025 NCAA tournament, I am going to go with I am going to go with Florida. Even though I did pick Duke to win it all in the preseason, and I wanted to stick to it, the way Florida's been playing basketball, the talk of college basketball has been Auburn and Duke, but then Florida, they've been making some noise in the last week or so. They look like a championship team, and I feel like I just can't pass that up. But comment your final four down below. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, have a good one.